Hello, I'm Roaster Music, and you're watching Obsessive Compulsive Dynamics, where limitations are an invitation to be limitless. In today's episode, we're talking about the 3 things Barbara Maitland, being a badass fairy godmother, can teach you about being a better storyteller. So let's just, hop into it. The first thing is that names have power. We have here the list of names from all the characters in the film, with one of them being appropriately misspelled, I should think. And that's out of respect for people who, like theater majors who refuse to say Macbeth backstage at a theater. Some people just refuse to say the name of this character. And it won't be said in this video out of respect to people who feel that way, but you will see it spelled out properly at one point in this video. Just want to give you a heads up of that. But before we get there, we have other things to discuss, including the variety of names here that are evoking different stories from throughout of history and mythology and lore that all add to the world building of this 80s classic. So first up, we have Adam. Adam was led by Eve, who was led by the serpent to eat the forbidden fruit, knowledge of good and evil, or in this case, the knowledge of life and death, what's going on in terms of being living and dead. Adam is a character who's supposed to be equal to his partner and yet is continuously being led by his partner. And this actually sets the precedent for the other couplings that are going on in the entirety of the film. Next up, we have Barbara, who is potentially named after Saint Barbara, who was the Christian daughter of a pagan ruler. Now, he wanted her to get married to help him out politically, as many rulers are wont to do, and she was having none of it. So he was going to have her live in a tower. And she was cool with that because she just wanted to save herself for Jesus, like Christian dames do sometimes. It's a thing. So he builds a tower. She is living in it. He goes out of town and has these builders make sure a bath is installed in her tower so that she can properly take care of herself. He's confined her to a tower, but he's still providing for his daughter. And she convinces the builders to install 3 windows in her tower, which will be her little bit of a nod to the Holy Trinity. When her father comes back, he questions her and questions her and questions her about those 3 windows, and eventually she relents and confesses that she is a Christian. He takes her to his council, and they sentence her to all these various forms of torture that will end up culminating in her own father taking her to her tower and her 3 sacred windows and beheading her with his own sword. But the thing is, when he beheads her, he is struck down by lightning. Immediate vengeance. She is dead, and then boom, he's taken out as well. So Barbara, the saint, the tower, and the power, all these things being immediately evoked when you hear Adam call her by her name for the first time, even if you don't know the references, and the fact that when you first meet both of these characters, it's in the attic of their house. And that becomes the most significant setting in the film for them for a very long time. It is the place where they anchor and the place where they hold their power as much as they are able to during the more turbulent times of the film. Then you have Bumplestiltskin, as we are calling him in this film. Now, his name is actually a sort of misspelling of a mispronunciation of an Arabic name for the star of the upper quadrant. The way the name translates in the original Arabic is the hand of the Arabic figure of mythology, history that they saw in the night sky, but who the Greeks named Orion. So this hand up here, with this hand being the one that would hold back the arrow, this hand is the one holding the bow. The bow gives you power, but it's also very important in terms of how you focus it. This tension here is what's being released. So this hand is all about aiming and all about focus and all about what you're doing. And in the film, he never says his own name. And writing it doesn't appear to count, considering how many times it gets written down over the course of the film, and even switching up the modality in which it is written. It's written in 2 times on the flashing lights pointing toward the grave in Adam's model. It's written with Rumpelstiltskin lies here on the tombstone, and then it's written on the coffin itself. Writing it down evidently is not enough to call him. Also on the paper ad, it says his name 2 times, and the 3rd time it's incomplete. And Adam tries to read it out loud and mispronounces it, which harkens back to when Adam and Barbara first die, and he mispronounces the name of the handbook they received, which is the handbook for the recently deceased. He says diseased, she corrects him, he restates deceased with all the dramatic music underneath. So Rumpelstiltskin is really calling to mind this power that needs to be focused. And that's an important thing that we will get to. Then, of course, there's Juno, their caseworker, the Roman equivalent of the goddess Hera, who was queen of the gods. And in Roman mythology, Juno is married to Jupiter. Subtle, obvious pairings abound in this film, starting actually very early with Adam and Barbara, but also in the song that Adam listens to, Man Smart, Woman Smarter, which we will also get to later. But Juno, being a person whose name immediately evokes incredible power, incredible control and ruling over others, who doesn't want Barbara to say the name when she almost says it. And you'll actually see that the 2 people who get shushed on the name are Barbara and Lydia, whereas Adam never gets shushed. He just repeatedly mispronounces it. He doesn't get shushed until the end when he already knows how to pronounce the name, and Rumpelstiltskin is the one stopping him, which again, we will get to that. Then you have Charles and Delia. Their names work sort of in tandem because with regards to various mythology, Delia is a shortened name for Bedelia, Cordelia, and Adelia, all different figures, and it's very difficult to figure out which one it means. And Charles is a very sort of lost name, bland name. It could refer to anything, but when you see them together as a pair, it evokes the story of Cordelia and the legend. Now, Cordelia is most commonly known thanks to Shakespeare's King Lear, in which she doesn't want to flatter his ego, so he tells her to get out. And so they are sort of in exile themselves, going out to the sticks for peace and quiet and to figure out what their next move is. And she wants to be involved in everything, but she also really wants to do things incredibly her way. And I have here the note A, B, and C, D, because Charles and Delia's pairing really closely mirrors the pairing of Adam and Barbara. Adam and Charles do make decisions in the films, but Barbara and Delia are ultimately the ones who are taking action, and they are ultimately the ones who are leading Adam and Charles into the decisions that they make and the ownership that they have to take in order to live with those decisions. So there is this lost name quality that is really important later and helps us to focus in on Adam and Barbara as the primary couple, while Charles and Delia, with their sort of lost name qualities, taking a sort of backseat to what's going on with that storyline. Next up, there's Otho. So Otho is the one who correctly guesses at the dinner party that suicide leads to becoming a civil servant in the afterlife. But this is an interesting thing for him to say because Otho, in Roman history, was a Caesar for a period of exactly 3 months, which ended with his killing himself. Being a Caesar, being a ruler, should make you a kind of civil servant, and being a civil servant is what led Otho to killing himself. He led men into battle trying to hold on to his being Caesar, and 40,000 men died. And rather than cause more men to die, as the story goes, he decided to kill himself instead. And it could have been that that was why he killed himself. It could be that he did it in order to avoid the shame of capture. Either way, Otho was only the ruler of Rome for 3 months. And that's an important note because in the film, when Adam and Barbara go to the afterlife, DMV situation, to get help, when they come home, everything has changed. And Otho is the one who has predominantly acted on that, on the behest of Delia wanting to make the house her own so she does not go insane, as she tells Charles. And when they ask themselves how long they've been gone, Juno's the one who tells them 3 months. Juno, the Roman goddess, tells them the timeline of Otho's rule. And that is an important parallel there. There's an important thing to consider in terms of what this reveals in terms of Otho as the hand of Delia, the right-hand man of Delia, which then brings us back into reminiscing and foreshadowing of the hand of Orion being then the hand of Adam and Barbara, as we will be discussing. Then, of course, you have Lydia and Delia. Those two names have a consonant dissonance, which creates more questions. So, Delia and Lydia are at odds from the very beginning. We see Charles adores both of them, in speaking to Lydia, refers to Delia as being Lydia's mother. But then when Lydia meets Adam and Barbara properly, she is quick to correct them and tell them that Delia is her stepmother. And so they are at odds in terms of how they compete for her father's affection, how they compete for room in the house to express themselves, just as the ghosts and the humans are competing for who is in charge of the house. And then also, in order to further elaborate on the odds at which Lydia and Delia stand, we have the consonant dissonance. Lydia being a sort of reversal of Delia. There is the same phonetic weight in the way that their names are said, but the consonants of the name, D and L, have been reversed, showing that on every level, they are at odds with each other. So that is an important thing. And Lydia's name brings up more questions. Delia's name, you have no idea what mythology is being referred to with her name, but you guess that it's Cordelia because of Charles. And then Lydia, her name is actually a land of origin that, like, the mythology is lost. The legends are lost. The stories are untellable. They're untellable. They are untold. And that's an important thing to remember about Lydia because she is so young and she is so new. And because she isn't paired with anyone and doesn't have a hand of power to focus as of yet. Then the second thing that Barbara Maitland, being a badass fairy godmother, can teach us is that when you're in doubt with regarding your storytelling, turn to fairy tales, power of threes, symmetry and parallels, dichotomy and pairings, and intuitive logic. So first you had the power of threes. With Barbara, Lydia, and Delia, you have a fairy godmother, young girl, and stepmother trio. That is a classic trio of a young woman's story of her growing up, of her being initiated to her power in some way. The fairy godmother is teaching her how to take care of her, how to take hold of her own power. The stepmother is, trying to cling to her own power, is usually the frame up, and doesn't know how to hold space for others' power. And this often leads to the stepmother mistreating the daughter in order to keep her power tamped down so that it will not come into direct conflict with her own power. Then you have the two trios of women with men on either side of them. You have Barbara with her husband and Barbara with Bumplestiltskin as the hand of power for focusing. And then you have Delia with Charles on one side and Otho on the other side, the power that needs to be focused. Then you have Lydia caught between these two sets of parents. She's caught between the living and the dead. She's caught between those who can hold space for people of varying powers and varying perspectives and those who are much more strict, or at least they seem strict, but are actually so out of control with regards to their own power, they exert control over everything else in an attempt to feign control of their own power. And the fact that she can see beyond the veil is made immediately evident. When we first see her, she is wearing a literal veil, foreshadowing of the fact that she's going to be able to see and communicate with from the very beginning, both the living and the dead. Then you have symmetry and parallels. Bumplestiltskin and Otho paralleling each other, Adam and Barbara being paralleled by Charles and Delia. These couples where the woman seems to be the central harbinger of power and the male, her primary partner, being her aide, being this person who supports her and is her equal, but ultimately must defer to her use of power and how she wants things to be, how she wants the world around her to manifest. And Bumplestiltskin and Otho being what happens when we lose grip of the bow and are not focusing our power, and it is just completely released and going all over the goddamn place in a fucking shitstorm. So that's the similarity and parallels. And then you have the dichotomy and pairings. So Adam and Barbara as a pairing, Adam and Barbara and Charles and Delia being that couple pairing where they are equals, but it's the women who are taking the lead. Barbara and Bumplestiltskin, with Bumplestiltskin being what it looks like when Barbara's power is just completely unleashed and uncontrolled. Otho being the realization of Delia's power when it is unleashed and uncontrolled. We've seen the house. It's cool, but it's also not Adam and Barbara's house. And that is something that they proactively work to correct as soon as they see it and do manage to do. Then you have the Barbara-Delia pairing, the two mothers who are trying to give their own kind of guidance to Lydia. Barbara wanting to let Lydia grow up and grow into herself, and Delia wanting to hold on to her own power, but also to be a good role model to Lydia, as we see when she runs up the stairs to the attic, trying to give Lydia the teaching moment, the real life lesson moment of people that if you don't stand up for you, people, dead or alive, will walk all over you. And they force themselves into the attic in that moment. And then you have the Delia-Lydia pairing of, again, Delia trying to be a mentor to Lydia. So you have Barbara and Delia paralleling each other and really being opposites to each other, and Barbara being much more aware of her power because she's dead and because she can see the immediate results of it, and Delia not quite realizing the repercussions yet because she still has the veil pulled over her eyes and she can't quite see through the veil. And Delia and Lydia, again, that dichotomy of stepmother and stepdaughter, a woman coming into her power and a woman who should know how to use her power but is not actually all that aware, and that's why she's feeling threatened by someone else's burgeoning power. Then you have the intuitive logic element of fairy tale telling. So when we first meet Bumplestiltskin, Barbara is the one who first says the name 3 times and correctly and gets them into the model of the town. And then when they're done talking to Bumplestiltskin, she says home, home, home to get them out because that's where she wants to be. She intuits that that's where she wants to be, and she is able to call upon her own power. She is able to focus it to get where she wants to go, but she doesn't realize that he's out and that he needs to be put back, which then comes later. So after they say home, 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 they then go and possess the dinner party and make them sing the Banana Boat song, the Deo song, as it's frequently referred to. And so in that moment, if you watch the scene carefully, you see that Lydia is standing in the corner during the possession. And this is a very important distinction that is made about who is getting possessed and who isn't. All these living adults have come into Adam and Barbara's home without their consent and done whatever the hell they want with it. So now, as justice, trying to get them out of the house, they are taking possession of their bodies and making them do what they want to do without their say-so, without their having any control over what's going on. It ultimately backfires because of these people's own view of things, but their choice of how to mess with these people is very telling and very interesting. And again, another instance actually of parallels and symmetry, because what has been enacted onto their home, they are now enacted onto these people, but these people can't even see it. That's how different their views of the world and their lives are. And then there are the rules of how and when to say the name Bumpelstiltskin without it being, Bumpelstiltskin, the proper name. And we see a couple of things that go on in this film. Only women ever say his name all the way through. Adam begins to say it and mispronounces it. Then Barbara pronounces it properly. And the first time she says it, they feel immediately, intuitive logic right there, they feel it, that she's got the pronunciation right. She's saying it 2 more times and they're getting into the model. And then when they say home, 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 and they get home and do the possession and it doesn't work, and then Bumpelstiltskin reveals that he has been released, her intuitive logic tells her that if she says the name again 3 times, he'll go back. And it works. And he's trapped there again. He tells Lydia that he's trapped there again and needs her to get him out. And you see, he cannot say his own name, right? There's a Rumpelstiltskin quality there, hence the nickname Bumpelstiltskin. And Lydia says the name twice. She says a few words in between and it doesn't matter, but the 3rd time it almost does, but Barbara knows enough to stop her. It's like, if you don't understand what the power can do, don't risk it. So that's where she's trying to stop her, just like Juno stopped Barbara earlier. But Adam and Barbara have just come from a meeting with Juno, in which Juno has said the name of Beetlejuice, and I did say it that one time, and I'm only nervous about it because of how people react to it, not because, and we'll get to that, because intuitive logic, the rules of saying the name. Juno says Bumpelstiltskin twice without even flinching. They know how to pronounce the name anymore. The cat is out of the bag, but she says it twice. She limits it. And then when they speak to Lydia, they immediately stop Lydia. She knows she shouldn't say the name ever again. But then later, when Barbara and Adam are in trouble, because Otho is an idiot, unleashed power, is unfocused, gets terrible results, can get good results, can get big results, can get really terrible results. When she goes to help them with via Bumpelstiltskin, she has to start over in the count of 3. She can't pick up where she left off and just say his name once. It doesn't count. It's not enough to say the name 3 times. You have to say it out loud. Writing it isn't enough. You have to say it out loud 3 times within the moment of a singular intention. Which brings me to an example outside the film that I want to discuss. Bumpelstiltskin showing up sort of in the background of the show Community. Over the course of the series, the writers decided to have this joke where Bumplestiltskin, over the course of the show, was going to get said 3 times. And the third time it happened, that they would have a cameo of Bumplestiltskin show up on campus in the background. Now, the writers deciding that have a singular intention moment that does carry throughout the series. But they also have a very focused intention in that he will only arrive for a cameo that will freak fans out. Within the context of the show, within the world of the show, the fact that the name has been said 3 times does not actually materialize Bumplestiltskin. It doesn't actually work that way. He hasn't actually been released on the campus. He has been released as an Easter egg on the show by the writers, but the characters of the show have not released him on the campus because that's not how it works. You need a singular moment, which is something Bumplestiltskin is acutely aware of when at the false wedding scene, the con wedding scene, Adam begins to say the name 3 times and is shushed 3 times, ultimately sent into the model. And Barbara isn't just shushed. She gets her mouth zippered shut. She gets the medal put over her face. And the thing is, even she's got the medal put over her face, and then she gets sent to Saturn, which means that Bumplestiltskin, by intuitive logic, could tell that she had enough power on her own that she could have gotten that off her face and banished him before the wedding was done. And so he got rid of her, not realizing that the power a person's power cannot vanquish them unless that is their intention in focusing their power. You can put your power to the side, you can tell it not now, you can say, save it for later kind of a thing, which is ultimately what happens when you're calling the name to take him out, calling the name to put him back. But the power that is being wielded cannot turn against the one who wields the power. That's the real reason he needs to partner with Lydia. He needs to be made her equal by marriage, which has been subtly reminded of throughout the entire film. Barbara being married to Adam makes Adam her equal, even though she is the one who is truly wielding power. Charles being married to Delia makes Charles her equal, even though Delia is the one ultimately wielding power. Lydia is coming into her power, so she doesn't know where she's at yet in order to designate someone as being her equal, and Bumplestiltskin is attempting to take advantage of that. So lots of things that work in terms of the intuitive logic. It is all over the place, but if you stop and slow down, you can really work the hell out of it and have a whole lot of fun with it. It's one of the most integral parts of fairy tale writing. It's why nobody questions it when the cat suddenly starts talking and asks for a pair of boots. Nobody questions it because intuitive logic, oh, of course the cat talks. How else would I know what the cat needs to tell me unless the cat talked? Duh. Which brings us to the third item, be progressively subversive. So we have 2 song titles here that come up again and again, that come up a couple times in the video that this discussion we've been having and come up in the film. So first, when we are first getting to know Adam and Barbara, Barbara goes to talk to their friend, Jane. Awful. I mean, names have power. Like, you hear plain Jane, everyday Jane, and then her daughter is referred to as Little Jane, as in she's just like the bland factor. She is designed to be completely neutral, but also completely frustrating. She's just an infuriating, awful human being, especially with the shit she says to Barbara at the very beginning about family planning stuff. Like, not your place, Jane. Shut your face. Never heard of adoption? Screw you. So, yeah. But the progressively subversive thing is when Adam goes into his workshop, into the garage, he turns on the song Man Smart, Woman Smarter. Which again alludes to what's going on in terms of the power dynamics in the film. It's named for the villainous, explosive ghost power that is represented by a male, and yet the women hold all the power in this film. Men make decisions, women take action, which is the smarter thing, because nothing gets done if you don't take action. And then there is the shake, 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 senora, jump in the line, which is when we see Lydia being given the freedom to come into her own power, which we see at the end of the film when they have found an equilibrium in terms of sharing the house. Now, we see Adam and Barbara are remaking the home to look the way they want it to look. They're undoing Otho's work. And Charles and Delia are upstairs where the office is. And apparently her studio is also, because she's got that sculpture of Bumpelstiltskin going. And she's gone from very abstract art to art that's very focused and very detail oriented. So she's learned a lot more about her own power, and she's come a lot more into her own power in a really interesting way. And there's room for all of them. It's a big house. It should have a family in it, which is the one thing that Jane says that's true, but she said it in a really insensitive time, and it ends up being what is true. Like, Adam and Barbara want a family. Now they have a family, and there's room for all three of these women to explore and make use of their power. And I'm sure that in undoing the remodel, they probably left the kitchen remodel that Delia did, because that actually is really fucking fantastic. I love what she did with the kitchen. I liked the kitchen before. I like both versions of the kitchen, but oh my God, I have a special place in my heart for what Delia did with that kitchen. I'm not gonna lie. And also, they're ghosts. They don't eat. They don't need the friggin' kitchen. But Jump in the Line shows Lydia coming into her power and being guided in that power and how to make use of that power through the agreement she has made with Adam and Barbara regarding her grades and how she gets rewarded. And she wants to have a fun possession. So we have earlier in the film possession without consent, just like the house was taken over without consent. But here at the end of the film, she's getting what she wants. She wants to feel that power. She wants to levitate. She wants to dance. She wants to have some dead football players as her backup. She wants to have fun. She wants to express her power. And she's doing it in a way with basically parental guidance of using that power, of dipping into it, of getting to know how it feels, which is an important thing to know in terms of being able to figure out who your equal is going to be someday and how well they'll be able to support you in your efforts in focusing your power and making use of it. Support is very important. When Barbara gets sent to Saturn, Adam knows that he still needs to be proactive, trying to figure out how to take down Bumpelstiltskin, even though he's teeny tiny and stuck in his model. But the thing is, no one knows his model like he does, which makes Bumpelstiltskin sending him there a huge mistake. And so he gets in the teeny tiny car, drives off the table, crashes into the foot, causes a distraction that prolongs the wedding from being finalized, and Barbara is able to swoop in with the sandworm, and Bumpelstiltskin is toast. And who has the power? The women have the power. Throughout the entire thing, the film is named for the villain, and yet, who's getting shit done? Juno's the caseworker. Barbara's the one who's actually calling the shots with regards to Bumplestiltskin. Delia's calling the shots with Otho, who ends up skedaddling because he's, you know, a baby. And also he's Otho. Just in ancient history, that's what he does. Rather than get captured, he just ditches. The women have the power. It is a progressively subversive film. You don't even notice that that's what's going on, that this is, in fact, a feminist fairy tale of women coming into their own power. And it's super progressive as far as feminist fairy tales go, because not only does the young woman become initiated into her own power and how desirable it is, but also the fairy godmother and the young girl together help to heal the stepmother's relationship with her own power and her ability to focus it and create around her what she really wants and what she really needs. If she really needed the whole house she's an artist, she needs to create. Working on the house was actually kind of just puttering. She didn't make any new sculptures. We saw all the sculptures at the start of the movie, and then you saw the house was different and there were no new sculptures because her power was not focused on creating her art. It just went all over the place and she wasn't making progress. So it's really great. So to remind, the 3 things that Barbara Maitland, being a badass fairy godmother, can teach you about being a better storyteller is that names have power. When in doubt, turn to fairy tales and the elements of writing a fairy tale, and be progressively subversive. In fact, the title of this video reflects all 3 of these things. Names have power. Barbara Maitland immediately evokes to anyone familiar with the film without actually having to name the film and make anyone uncomfortable who doesn't like hearing the name said aloud and what that could potentially bring up. Then, of course, referring to Barbara Maitland as a badass fairy godmother evokes fairy tales, evokes that lesson, and teach you about being a better storyteller is itself subversive and progressive, because my underlying theory for everything I create is that if we can improve the stories we tell ourselves and the stories we tell each other and the stories we're telling together as a family, collective, community, society, whatever, little by little, day by day, we can build a better world through better storytelling. That's my philosophy, and there you have it. So thank you very much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Later, neighbors.